Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining this webinar today. My name is Arabella David, and I'm currently with the Developer Relations team here at Salesforce. And I'm super happy to be introducing one of our top rock stars of the Developer Evangelism team, Mr. Greg Ruiz. You might have seen him on some of the Lightning Now tours that have been sweeping the world over the past year or so. So he's been talking quite a lot on Lightning components and how it affects your development. And today, he'll be expanding a little bit more on a blog post that he wrote in the first week of August. Originally, this blog post was called Winter is Coming to Lightning. And if you look for it now, you'll be seeing it with a slightly different title. And now he'll be talking about Lightning updates and how it affects your Summer 17 and what to look for in your Winter 18 updates and beyond. So I'd love to welcome you, Greg. If you could let us know you're there, then we can get started.
I'm not here, Arabella.
Just a quick housekeeping note before we get started. So you might have noticed as you joined, you are in listen-only mode. So if you do have any questions, just pop it into the Q&A field of your GoToWebinar screen. And if you're having any sort of slide lag, go ahead and leave the webinar and rejoin, and those issues should resolve itself. And so with that, I'll let Greg take it away.
All right, thank you, Arabella. I will add my hello to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be dialing in from. I'm actually broadcasting today from sunny Phoenix, Arizona, and it is a balmy 100 degrees here. So hope you are having a lovely day as well. We are going to be talking about summer, winter, and beyond. But before we move any further, of course, you know this is a Salesforce presentation, and so we must show you the obligatory forward-looking statement slide. Now, we're showing this because, of course, we want you to only make purchasing decisions on features that are generally available. And I will be talking about some forward-looking things. So again, please do not base your purchasing decisions on some of the things that I might be talking about coming in future releases. And with that, let's dive in. First, of course, please, as we go through the webinar, feel free to join us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter, either at us at Salesforce Devs account or hashtag SalesforceDX. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. And yes, this webinar is being recorded. So if you have colleagues or friends that missed it, were not able to attend, or you just like to go back and review what we've gone over, then again, you will be receiving an email, and you can go back and look at this at a future date. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I've got about 6 topics that I want to go through. We're going to start with something that has just become generally available, and that is the Lightning Data Service. We're going to talk a little bit about Lightning Data Service and then how you implement that into your Lightning components. And I'm also going to show that in connection with using Lightning components to override a standard action, because working with that Lightning Data Service is a really great way of building a component that you can use as a standard action override. From there, those are generally available features. And from there, we are going to move into Winter 18 and talk about what is coming in Winter 18. There are some things that you and I, as developers, need to be aware of. We need to do actually to our Lightning components in order to make sure that they perform properly and as expected in Winter 18. We're also going to talk a little bit about what Visualforce is up to in the Lightning experience in Winter 18, because there's some great new news on the horizon for that. And then finally, we'll talk about some new base Lightning components, and I'll show you a little bit on how to deal with those. All right, so those are our topics. So let's get started. we're going to get started with that Lightning Data Service that we were just talking about. So what is Lightning Data Service? When I'm asked what is Lightning Data Service, I can literally sum it up in about 5 words, and that is a standard controller for Lightning. It's the answer to why do I, as a Lightning component developer, always have to write Apex, server-side Apex code in order to do those simple things that I am used to doing with standard controllers in the Visualforce world. So let's first talk about what it's like without Lightning Data Service and why we felt the need to create the Lightning Data Service. So without Lightning Data Service, you imagine a page where you've got 3 different components on the page, and all 3 of the components are interacting with a specific record. Well, when that happens without Lightning Data Service, that page loads, all 3 of those components are making requests to the server. And that server-side code may even be calling the exact same server-side code, but they're doing it 3 times. Well, of course, we know that that's not an efficient way of doing things. We don't want to hit our limits just because we've got 3 components all doing the same thing on the page. And furthermore, this can drive even UI inconsistencies because we are dealing with 3 components all making their calls, and we don't know what the timing is on those the results of those calls coming back. Right? So this is sort of where we began when we began thinking about Lightning Data Service. Now, Lightning Data Service is sort of a core that sits in between sort of the UI, SDK, and APIs and our components, right? And it provides a number of different features. The first one I mentioned was the declarative CRUD operations. So why do I have to write Apex, server-side Apex, in order to create, read, update, or delete a record? Well, with Lightning Data Service, the answer is I don't. This means I don't have to write any Apex, no SOQL queries at all in order to do those, perform those type of interactions. Of course, now this is not just the wild, wild west. We have to make sure that we are also doing things like enforcing our field level security and sharing. And this is all built in to the Lightning Data Service. What it also means is that if we're going to make a request, that we can cache that request so that we are not making another request 3 seconds later for the same exact record data. This is a great benefit because it also allows us to begin watching that record and be notified if that record actually changes, have our components react to this. And we're going to look at all of this as we get into some code here in a little bit. And then finally, one of the really cool ones is offline access. Offline access for Salesforce 1. So if we are, on the train, on the subway, and suddenly we lose connectivity, well, we don't want to lose all of our work. And again, Lightning Data Service comes to the rescue with that. So in a nutshell, what that really means is that Lightning Data Service is there to perform a single request. So even though I have 3 components on the page, all asking for that same record data, instead of those 3 requests that we saw earlier, we're now getting 1 single request. And that response that comes back is being cached. And being cached so that if those components need a 4th component comes along and says, oh, by the way, I now need that same record data, we again do not have to make another trip to the server for that. So that is Lightning Data Service in a nutshell. But the question is, how do I, as a developer, implement this? Now, again, I'm going to show you some live code here a little bit later, but let's go through the anatomy of this force record data. This is actually what it is called. This is the object in our components that we add to our components in order to work with the Lightning Data Service. So there are a lot of pieces. Now, I've given you literally on screen all of the various pieces that could make up a potential force record data object, but let's step through each one of them individually. The first thing is, of course, the force record data tag. That is, of course, announcing the object itself or creating that object. And of course, so that we can address this from within our JavaScript code, we're going to need an Aura ID. In this particular case, that Aura ID is called property service. Now, the force record data object works in connection with the other pieces of your Lightning component, specifically with Aura attributes. And as we all know, these Aura attributes, these are our data containers that are value providers, if you will, for our data. So it's where we are storing our data. And the first one that we're going to work with is the record ID. You'll notice that we have an attribute entitled record ID, and it is currently being set to be equal to the value provider for record ID. Now this again is working also in connection with the Force has record ID interface that we're going to add to our component. And now what this means is that we are going to look at that record ID, the record ID of the current record page that we are on, and we are then going to perform some actions. Basically, when that record ID is assigned, Force record data says, all right, let me head to the server. Let me head to the server and retrieve that data. Now, I just lied to you. It doesn't necessarily go to the server and retrieve that data, because that data may already have been retrieved. As we talked about a moment ago, if another component has already made that request and that data has come back, again, it is cached, therefore we've already got it. But either way, whichever way it happens to be in our example here, whether we have gone to the server and retrieved it or we are using it from the cache, Force record data is then going to assign all of the data, all the fields from that data to whatever we define as the target record. In this particular case, it is another value provider, another Aura attribute named property. As you can see, it is of type property. So this is actually an S object, a custom S object in this particular case. So it's being assigned now into that Aura attribute, which means that we then can address the values that have been stored there. And the way that we do that, we do it in actually two ways. And we're going to look at both ways here. The first way is if we are using the target record property, we're going to then address this by addressing, first of all, the name of our attribute, in this particular case, property. And then we're going to say we're interested in going into the fields. So it's property.fields. Tell us which field we're interested in this particular case, our price, and then .value to get the value of that particular field at this moment. Now, that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is using something called target fields. Target fields in this particular case is set to another value provider, another attribute called property fields. Now, using the target fields and target record are essentially the same thing. The difference is how you address the values within them. So you'll notice that property fields is also of type property. But when we talk to this particular value provider, we're simply saying, give me the name, property fields, dot, and then in this case, price. So we're simply asking for the price in the same way that we asked for it in the previous example, but it's just a shorter way of writing in our notation. The way that you do this, the way that you decide to code is up to you. There's really no big difference between using target record or target fields. So it really is up to you and just the way that the verboseness that you want to add to your code. All right, so now that we understand how the record is stored, let's talk about what is the unique value proposition of that record data, that Force record data. And that is the fact that it can begin to watch the data. Now, I will tell you the very first time that I built my very first Lightning component, almost 2 years ago now, the first question I had for one of my colleagues was, okay, I've got this Lightning component, and what I want to do is when this field changes in this record, I want my Lightning component to do something. And I was told, well, there's really no way. And that's one of the great things that we're addressing here with Force record data, is the ability for Force record data to begin watching the fields, watching that data. So whatever we have stored there in either target record or target fields, we're going to begin to watch that data. And when that data changes, is updated, then we can fire a client-side JavaScript function, in this case, do search. So this function in our client-side controller will, in the component, will fire whenever it sees that record being updated. Now, there are a couple of other pieces to the force record data anatomy that I'd like to address, and one is the idea of fields. Now, when we said target record and target fields, we were really sort of talking about, okay, great. I said it's taking all of the fields from that record. Well, yes and no. It depends on what we actually specify. You'll notice there are two things highlighted here. There's layout type full and then fields equals. So first, let's address layout type full. Layout type equals full tells us to go get all of the fields for this particular record. Again, adhering to field level security. So if I am not able to see a particular field because of my user permissions, then of course that field is not going to be available to me. But we're going to go and get all the ones that are visible to that particular logged in user and provide those to the component. Alternatively, there is also a layout type compact. So layout type equals compact says we're doing it from the compact layout. So full layout or compact layout. Then additionally, we have the fields opportunity, and that or attribute, excuse me. And that attribute says, okay, I'm really only interested in a particular number of fields. For example, ID, name, price, and status. Now there's something really important here as well. You can actually combine layout type full and or layout type compact and fields together. So you might actually have a reason to use both. Now, why would that be? Well, using the fields property, I can actually tell force record data to get a field that is not visible on a particular layout. For example, maybe an image URL or something like that. So I can combine the layout type full and fields together to get all of the fields that I know happen to exist in that record that I am interested in for my component. And then finally, we have the final attribute, and that is mode. Mode equals edit. Mode equals edit means that we are now actually going to be able to edit this particular record. So backing up, without mode equals edit, force record data is always in a view mode. So it is looking at the record, but it is unable to actually update that record. Adding mode equals edit says, yes, not only do we want to view the record, not only do we want to watch for changes coming from someplace else, but we also want to have the ability for our component to update the record itself. So that's the anatomy of Lightning Data Service and the force record data object. So let's talk about a couple more things. We're going to look at all of this in code, but I want to set the stage here first so that we don't have to switch back and forth between slides and code. I mentioned standard action overrides that we can now do with Lightning components as well. Because of course, we know that now, as of summer 17, Lightning components can literally live anywhere. They can live on a page, of course, we know that. But they also can live in the utility bar. They can live as a quick action. And now, again, with summer 17, they can also be used as the interface for overriding any standard action. So literally any standard action that you can imagine overriding, you can do with a Lightning component today. Now, there are a couple things that you need to know, and we'll cover that when we get into the actual code. So shifting gears. The things that we've just talked about, those were available to us in summer 17. Now shifting gears into winter 18. A few things that we need to know. The first thing that we need to be aware of as a developer is a new look. The look of winter 18 has been updated. You'll notice that it appears to be an image and a color behind the page. You notice how all of the areas of my page, the components on my page, are sort of standing out, popping out of the page. This is because, yes, in winter 18, we have a new background, a background image and a background color gradient. Now, the reason that we've added this is simply due to the fact that we heard a lot of users tell us that, you know, as great as Lightning Experience is, I feel sort of snowblind. There's a lot of white in there, and it's sort of hard to tell where one thing ends, another begins, and draw my eyes to the things that are important on the page. So this was the first thing that we've added into winter 18, but it has ramifications for you and I as a developer. The first thing is that background change. That background change means that we need to examine our components. I've got this little snippet of a screenshot here we're going to look at in depth when we get into the code. But you'll notice that I have two components there. One I can see clearly, the other one sort of hard to see what's going on. Because as I was developing this particular component, I was working fast, wasn't thinking about the fact that I might need a background color on this. Because of course, as you and I as developers, we've been building these components. We've not been thinking about background colors simply because it was on white. So of course we could see whatever we put there into the component. That's going to need to be addressed. Also lift density. There's a lot more to be seen. So this is a screenshot of summer 17 and the very same properties listing in winter 18. You'll notice how the list is much more compact. So we can see a lot more data in a smaller area. Page legibility as well. The font size has been slightly increased. It's literally only a couple pixels, but it makes a difference so that we can very quickly be able to spot content on the page as well. Static resources, another big area. If you are using static resources within your components, stop doing that, because with static resources, when things like winter 18 roll out with all of these new changes, you don't get any of them. So this is a very important thing to be aware of. You're not getting anything if you're using a static resource. In order for your components to be updated, to get the new things available, the new look, you're going to have to go and create a brand new static resource, download that, re-upload it into your org, repackage that if you are packaging your components. It is not recommended anymore. Instead, we should be using the current version of SLDS, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. But if we are using that current version, we are going to get all of the new goodness into our components and our pages. Now, finally, of course, with winter 18, we realize that for some of you, this may be a bit of a challenge, a bit of a change. You've got some components that need to be updated, maybe some pages that need to be changed or modified because of this new theming and branding. Now, you'll notice we're calling it branding. Forward-looking statement. Currently, with winter 18, you can toggle this on and off. You can do this in your setup. And if you toggle it off, basically what happens is you go back to the white background. Actually, it's just a slight off-white that we've been seeing all this time in Lightning Experience. You'll still get some of the things. You'll notice that those components still sort of pop a little bit because they do have sort of a drop shadow and some borders that sort of help them to be identified there on the page. You get that, but you don't get that background color and or image. Now, I said forward-looking statement. Down the road, we have every intention of making that image and as that color a configurable option for your individual orgs. But again, that is a forward-looking statement. So that's what we've got to think about as developers in winter 18. To help us build with things, of course, base Lightning components. There's in summer 17, we had a new slew of base Lightning components. And again, those base Lightning components are there to help you and I build. And as we are building with these base Lightning components, we again are getting all of the beautiful updates that come along with each new release of the Lightning Experience, because these are based upon SLDS, upon the Salesforce Lightning Design System. And again, if you've never experienced them, base Lightning components are literally just declarative tags, very much like you and I are used to in Visualforce, where we're just sort of saying, hey, I want to have a Lightning button, for example, and let the framework figure out how to build that, what the HTML behind the scenes needs to be for this particular button. And again, as I said, in winter 18, we have a slew. There's 30 new base Lightning components coming to you in winter 18. We are very, very quickly coming on par with all of the Visualforce declarative tags and objects as well. So that is our intention, is to keep up not only with Visualforce, but surpass Visualforce and keep up with SLDS, with the Salesforce Lightning Design System, as they bring out new components for us to build with. Again, a ton of them here, way too many for me to go into in terms of showing you each and every one of them. But again, I'd encourage you to look at our release notes and or the developer's guide. We're going to touch on a couple of them here in just a moment when we dive into our code. But finally, I got to talk about Visualforce in Lightning Experience, because in Lightning Experience, now you have the option to make your Visualforce pages look like Lightning. Now, how are you going to do that? Well, I've been traveling around on the Lightning Now tour showing you how to do this manually, but with Winter 18, we have a simple switch that you can throw and make your page look like a Lightning experience. So your Visualforce pages actually becoming getting the look of Lightning experience. Again, we're going to talk all about this because now it is time for some code. All right, very quickly, I'm going to go back over all the things that we've covered. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about that force record data. Now, you'll notice that I have a component that I have here on the page that is showing the broker for my particular property. I'm using our Dreamhouse app. If you've never seen dreamhouseapp.io, you can go there, download that into your org, and play with all of the components that we have built for the Dreamhouse app. And this one is my broker's card. And I want to know who's the broker, and we can see that I have the broker here, but instead of having to mouse over to see his information, I wanted to be able to see that here just at a glance. But you'll notice it also says broker for, and I don't know what, there's nothing there. This is, again, one of those standard things. I want my component to be able to talk to the record that it is located on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up my developer console here. Now, as I open up my developer console, here is that component. And as you can see, this is using one of those base Lightning components. We have a Lightning card here that I'm using. And what I've actually said is I want to know the property name. So I want to say this is the broker for whatever property it is that we are looking at. But up to now, that would require me having to go in and write some Apex to have it go off, call the server and say, hey, what is the property name for the particular property that I'm looking at? And that's not what I want to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to just add in a line of code here. And I've just written a little shortcut here so I can add in a bit of code for you very quickly. And that is that force record data. So here we have that force record data object. Now, again, we've gone through the pieces of this, but what we're saying is this is going to be called property record, and it's going to get its record ID from the record ID attribute that is being delivered via the force has record ID interface. Now, again, you and I know that, well, the server's already delivered that because, of course, we're looking at that page. So we're going to take all of those fields and we're going to drop those into the value provider or attribute called property. Now, with that, that means that this now is populated. So all I have to do is simply save, look back over here at our page. Let's go ahead and refresh. And as we refresh this page, we'll notice that it now says we have the broker for 48 Brattle Street. So we're actually looking at the record, which also means if we go in and we edit this. So let's go ahead and make a change here. Let's just say this is not going to be written out as street. We're just going to say ST period. And we're going to go ahead and save that. Then what has happened is that record, that component has seen the change. It actually is watching that particular record, and it was able to update there within my component without having to do anything. All right, that's sort of impressive, but not really completely impressive. So let's take a look at a different example. We've called out to the broker and gotten the broker's information, and we did that by actually doing it in the initialization of our component. In our component, we have a do init function, and as you can see, we are calling out to our component, to our server-side controller. We're firing a get broker method up there, passing the record ID, bringing it all back, and populating that broker value provider. And that's how we were able to lay this out on the page. So let's first of all, just to prove that, again, no smoke, no mirrors, no magic happening here, I'm going to go ahead and copy or comment out the enqueuing of our action. We'll save this, which of course means now if we refresh our page, we'll notice that our broker card no longer has any broker information because we're now no longer talking to the server. And now I want to be able to get that data, get the broker's information without writing Apex. That's right, I'm actually going to get the information for another record, a completely different record than the one that I'm looking at here. And I'm going to do it without writing Apex. The way I'm going to do that is head back over here into our component. I'm just going to update my code here. And I'm going to do that with another little shortcut that I've created. And here we now have, let me just format this nicely. We have two force record data. The first one is the same one that you and I were looking at a moment ago. The only thing that has changed is it now has a record updated attribute that is calling out to the update broker method in our server or in our client side controller. Now that particular method, let's go take a look at that. It's right here. And basically what it's doing is declaring a temporary variable for our broker record, which is the broker record is the name of a second force record data object. And basically it is simply saying then, okay, now what we would like to do is to set the record ID. We're going to set the record ID by going into our property value provider and grabbing the broker's ID. And then we're going to reload that particular broker record. So what that means is now we're going to take those fields and we're going to populate them just like we did before with the server side action. And you'll notice that here again, we are doing the layout type full, but we're also adding in a fields to get an additional field, one that is not normally visible inside of our full layout. So if we go ahead and save this and we head back over and we refresh our page one more time, if all has gone well and the demo gods are playing nicely, there they are. We have now just retrieved all of that broker's information without writing a single line of Apex code. Now, mind blown. Now we can use that same thing, this same idea. We can use the same idea as we also handle other components. For example, I have two components here, similar properties by price, similar properties by bedroom. Actually, I lied. This is a single component that has a design parameter allowing my admins to specify what kind of search that this component should be doing. But you'll notice that this one is searching by price. It is searching by price, again, looking for properties that are plus or minus $100,000 of this particular record. So if I lower the price, let's say we'll drop the price down here to $700,000, again, it's actually gone out and done a new search. Now this did have some Apex because of course I needed to do a search on the server to get those records and bring them back. So it was updated itself when it saw this record change. But here's where it gets even more fun. You'll notice that we have 24 Pearl Street in both of the components. If I go out and edit 24 Pearl Street, let's say, for example, I want to change the number of baths at 24 Pearl Street and save that, you'll notice that both components just updated. But my friends, as I laid out for you in the slides, there was only a single call to the server to update that record. And both of those components, because they are both watching the same version of that record, they were both able to update, again, with only that single call using force record data. Again, really, really incredible. Now, we've just been watching things update, but of course, we also can go ahead and let's talk about a different use case of force record data. Now, we've been watching a record that existed, a property record, as well as updating a record. And by the way, did you notice when we were updating that? We just updated. Now, let me make sure that we understand this. I just updated 24 Pearl Street, and yet we are on the 48 Brattle Street record page. So using force record data, I'm able to update records that I'm not even looking at. Now, this is a really cool use case, but we can also use it to create records. So again, over here in this particular view, we're in our property listing here. And notice in our property listing, what we're going to do is we've got a new button, but I'm going to first take us over into setup and show you that what we've done here in our setup, I'm going to go into our property object. And in our property object, I'm going to go to my buttons, links, and actions. And notice that we are going to look at our new record, our new standard action. Notice that it has been overridden. How did we do that? We simply went in and said we would like to override that particular standard action with a Lightning component bundle. So again, as I mentioned, we can override standard actions with Lightning components. And now I'm combining that so that if we go back over here, we're going to combine our override with this component, and we're going to use force record data or the Lightning data service. So now when I say new, I can say new record. You'll notice here I have a dialog. It looks very similar to that edit dialog that we saw in the previous example because it is a Lightning component. Now be aware, when you are overriding Lightning or standard actions with Lightning components, by default, they will fill the entire page. So this would stretch out to fill that entire page in width-wise. And I didn't like the look of that. So I actually used some little SLDS magic, some Salesforce Lightning Design System magic to be able to say, you know what, I want to make this look sort of like a modal. But let's go ahead and type in 123 Main Street. And that's all we'll do. And we'll just go ahead and submit that. That is my only required field. And you'll notice that sure enough, we have 123 Main Street has been added there to our list of properties. How did this happen? Well, this is where it starts to get really interesting. Let's go back over to our developer console. And in our developer console, we'll take a look at that property dialog. Now, again, here we have that standard property dialog that we are talking about. But what we've done is we've said, okay, we've got a force record data. That's the regular record data. But what we want to do, that's the one that we were using to watch a particular page, but that's not the one that we're interested in. Because what we want to do is we want to actually know if there is a record ID. If there's not, it means we're not on a record page. We are, in fact, on a new we're being used as a new override in these standard property listings. And so we can actually use our force record, that same force record data, to create a new record. We can tell it what type of record we want, and we can begin to populate that record as well. So we're actually creating that record, and then once we have clicked the save button, we're actually telling it to fire the save record command or method of force record data. So again, we've created an entire record without writing a single line of Apex. Now we've gone one step further with this example as well, because you'll notice that I also have a quick edit action up here, and here I have used a quick action, again assigning that same edit record dialog component. And you'll notice that as it is loading, it's actually picking up the values that have been associated. And again, we're using force record data to do that, because that is why we had this initial force record data asking what is the record ID of the record record page that we're on. So as you can see, force record data is really cool. I hope you can see that. It is just really amazing, and is really going to change the way that you and I develop Lightning components. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. And this time we're going to shift gears by heading over into Winter 18. So here I have a Winter 18 page. And as you can see, we've got a bit of a problem. Here's that screenshot component, or that I took the screenshot of that component that you saw in the slides. We didn't know that we needed a background because, of course, up to now, we've been on white all along. Now, again, if you wanted to, I could turn off the background. And I can do that by going to my setup menu, and then in my quick find, simply typing in theme. Oops, that is if I begin to type there in theme, and that will take us right to themes and branding. And I could toggle this off so that my background would disappear. But I like the background. I like the pop. But what I want to do is update this particular component so that it looks proper. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll go back into our developer console for this particular org. And we're going to take the first page there, the first component. Let me just make this a little bit bigger here so you can read it without having to squint. And here is that component. Now the problem with that component is it's using some base lightning components. It's using the lightning layout component. But the problem with that is there's no background to this page. Now, there are several different ways that we can approach fixing this. Let's talk about each one of them and sort of the pros and cons. One way to do that is to simply go into the styles. Now, you'll notice I have a lot of styles here in this component. So if I simply add background dash color and make that equal to white and save that, then we can head back over here, refresh our page, and our component has now got a white background. Now that's okay, it looks all right, but I don't like the fact that I don't have much air around this. It's just sort of filling just the area of the component itself. So another alternative would be to say, all right, instead of doing it that way, let me just go ahead and revert that. So we'll just save. Instead of doing it that way, maybe a different way of doing it would be just to add in a class. So I'll add in a class equals SLDS-card. So that is, again, coming from the Lightning Design System. And as I save this, and I head back over here and refresh our document one more time, we're going to notice not much of a change. It's definitely got a white background, but there really is no difference because an SLDS card is really just doing that. It is just adding in that white background. Now, I said white. You might remember that back in our previous versions, let me go all the way back over here, over in our spring layouts, our cards were a gray background. But in Winter 18, those card backgrounds are now white. So this is another reason why we want to be using SLDS. And instead of trying to write our own styles and or use a static resource. So now another way of doing it, if I wanted to go ahead and make a change, let's just go ahead and remove that, might be to simply take this entire thing and say, I want to use one of those lightning cards, and I'm going to give it an icon, and I'm going to say this is going to be a custom icon, maybe custom 85 is one that, oops, and I need to be able to spell here, of course, as I'm trying to live code for you. Custom 85, let's hope that that's a good icon, and we'll give it a title, and we're going to say title equals days on the market. And there we go. Go ahead and take that lightning card, and we'll move that down to the bottom here and paste it in, save that, going back over, now we refresh, and we can see that now, in fact, we've got our icon, we've got a title, and again, I can add in a little bit more SLDSing here. Let's go ahead and say that we want a class of SLDS, actually not there, sorry, I wanted to do it on my layout here. We'll add a class of SLDS dash margin horizontal, actually padding, sorry, padding horizontal, and we'll make it be medium. Just like that. Saving that once again, refreshing our page, we'll notice that now our card is looking much better. And again, if in the future we were to change from a white background to a blue background on our cards, I'm going to get this because I am leveraging SLDS. So again, this is why I stress to you as a Lightning Components developer, try to use as much SLDS and as many base Lightning components as you possibly can. Now, another thing that we need to pay attention to is, again, we may need to go in and look at other components that are using lists. Because when we're using lists, we're actually getting a change. As I showed you before, let's go back over here to our properties tab here. This is back in spring. We see that listing there. But in winter, when we go to that same properties list, you'll notice it is a much more compact list that's allowing us to see a lot more data in the same space. Now, this means that if we are using lists in our components, we are automatically getting that. And in fact, I've actually done that down here in my leads component. I've actually listed out the leads for this particular property, and they are in a list that is coming again from SLDS. So I'm getting the nice compact spacing, which means if I had built this component and tried to put in a fixed height, for example, I might have some air that I don't need anymore and don't want. This is a reason we should never use a fixed height if we can avoid it. But this is, again, using a list, but it's using a very special kind of list. Because if I go back over here to my components here, we're going to go and find that particular component. And that particular component is not open, so let me go ahead and open that up. There's my leads component. And so my leads component, you'll actually notice, has a brand new thing. And this is one of those brand new component, or those brand new base Lightning components. This is the data table, so a Lightning data table. And all it is doing is it is feeding the data from my leads value provider, which is of type object up here. And I'm defining the columns that I want to show. The columns, again, are a value provider, but both of which are being assigned over here in my controller. So in my controller, I have simply defined the type of columns that I'm interested in. And then again, I've gone out to my server-side Apex controller and made a call to get the leads for this particular property. And there you go. Again, these base Lightning components, meaning giving us two benefits. Number one, allowing us to build much faster, because using them, I have a simple declarative tag. Also, because they're built on the Salesforce Lightning design system, it means that any updates to SLDS, any updates to the look and feel of Lightning Experience are going to automatically be inherited. All right, finally, let's talk about one more. This is sort of a neat one. I'm going to go back over here to my similar properties component. That similar properties component, again, is that same one that you and I have seen here that we were dealing with a moment ago. But I'm going to notice a couple of things on this. First of all, when I make a change to my particular property, let's go ahead and make this have 4 baths and go ahead and save this. You'll notice that I get a toast up here. Now, it's not that toasts were hard to create in the past, but now there is a brand new piece of it's sort of the force base Lightning components, but it is actually a new library. It's called the notifications library that has come out as part of these base Lightning components. If we look over at this, what it actually means is we'll go ahead into our edit dialog here, and you can see that this is the edit dialog. It is adding in this new notifications library. And what that means for you and I is that when I save, instead of me having to figure out how to build a toast and make it all happen, I can simply call the library and say, what do I want to do? Do I want to show a toast? Do I want to show an error message? There's even a modal as well, so not just notifications. We can say, I want to do a modal overlay, and you and I as developers don't have to go reinvent the wheel and figure out how to build all of those things. So really, really neat new addition. And finally, going back one more time to that similar properties component here, you'll notice that when I have this in this column, I've got sort of a list layout. Let's go ahead and go in here and say, you know what? If I was to say edit my page, and I was to take this same component, and maybe I was going to lay this out and put it somewhere else on the page. So let me go find my similar properties component. I'm just going to drag that up. I'm going to put it right here. And as I do so, you'll notice that it sort of looks a little bit odd, looks like stretched out. And that's just in that medium sort of area there. If I was to add this up here to the top of the page, then it really looks all stretched out here. So this is really not the way that I want my component to look. Let me go ahead and let that page save. And come on, you can go ahead and do that now. Oh, it's asking me to set a status here for my components. And you'll notice also as I'm doing so, one of the new things in Winter is the fact that we can actually add filters to our component to actually show the visibility of a particular component based upon criteria that we are setting. For example, maybe I only want this component or do not want to show this component when we are under agreement or closed. So I could hide it and only show it at other times. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is go ahead and save this page, and let's head back over here. Again, waiting for it to finish saving there. There we go. Now, as we head back over, we have our component on the page here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, you know what, I don't like, whoops, I did forget to save the component. Oh, well, I'll do it again here in just a moment. What I want to do is I want to talk about if this component is going to be somewhere else on the page, what can we do to handle the changing of the layout? So let's head back over here to our similar properties component. And you'll notice that we have a brand new thing here, and I'm just going to uncomment that. It is called the Lightning Flexi Page Region Info object. And by adding this to my page, we're actually going to pick up whether or not this particular page or this component is in a particular area of our page. So if I go ahead and save this, what it's going to do is you'll notice that I'm in my CSS down here where I'm adding my classes. I have some logic. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, if it is small, medium, or large. And by doing so, it means that when I head back over here and I go back in to edit my page, let's go ahead and edit that page. We're going to drag our similar properties component back out onto the page. And now, when I drag it into this middle area here, let's go ahead and place it there, you'll notice that it has a completely different layout. In fact, if I drag it up there into the top area there, you'll notice that it has a completely different layout as well. And again, I'm doing all of this by going back over here to our CSS and just applying different styles based upon whether or not we are small, medium, or perhaps large. So in this particular case, I'm saying we are 1 of 4 when it's large, 1 of 1 in small, and 1 of 2 when we are in medium. Again, applying those SLDS styles so that, again, if SLDS ever updates, I'm going to get all of the beauty as well. All right, let me head back over one more time. I'm just not going to worry about saving that page. And we're going to head back over to our last topic. And that last topic is Visualforce. So here we have a standard Visualforce page. And in that standard Visualforce page, of course, we can see it looks just like Classic. But now, my friends, we want it to look like Lightning. So I'm going to switch back over to my developer console one last time. Here is that Visualforce page. As you can see, very standard Visualforce markup. And here we're going to say the magic. The magic incarnation is Lightning Style Sheets. I'm going to say Lightning Style Sheets equals true. Save my page. Heading back over, we're going to refresh the page one more time. And my friends, there is now a Lightning look. Now, these are the Lightning styles coming again from SLDS. Now, this is not the SLDS styles. This is a modified version of SLDS. It is currently in development. In other words, the team is working really hard. I happen to know because my wife is the lead engineer on this project. And so she's standing next to me right now, coding away, getting these styles updated so that you will be able to set Lightning Style Sheets equals true and have your pages automatically take on the Lightning styles. Now be aware, what we're saying is it is these tags, things like Apex Select List, Apex Page Block Table. So anything that is an Apex : tag that is a visual tag that creates something visually on the page is going to take on additional styling or the styling of Lightning when you have that Lightning Style Sheets equals true flag set. But what it also means is in Classic, all of your Classic users are still going to see the page exactly as they always have. Now, again, you are going to need, I want to take this off one moment just to show you something. So we'll go ahead and save this. We'll go back over here. We'll refresh our page one more time. So there we have back our Visualforce styling the way it has always been. Now we realize it's going to be, you're going to need to go in and look at all of these pages on an individual basis. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over here in my to my tools in Chrome, and I'm just going to turn on an extension. Now this extension we are going to release in the Chrome store. I do not have a date, again, forward-looking statement. I do not have a date, but we will be releasing this soon in the Chrome store. And so when you have that extension enabled and you reload your page, you'll notice that you have a little box down here at the bottom left. This is where it is right now. It may move, but it says Open CSS List. So now we can open up and see all of the styling that has been applied to this page. This is all of the classic styles. So if you had your own styling as well, it would appear in this list. So you can toggle things on and off. But most importantly, you can see that Apply SLDS for Visualforce. When I click that button, you'll notice that now the page has been applied. All of the classic styling has been turned off. All of the SLDS styling has been turned on. I'll just prove that by turning it back off, making the page look completely ugly, and turning it back on. So this Chrome extension is going to allow you to go in and take a look at your pages on a page-by-page basis so that you understand what this page is going to look like if you were to throw that lightning style sheets equals true flag. This also means that, of course, this is non-destructive. It's only you in your browser looking at this page right now. So nobody else, none of my other users calling up this page right now are going to see it as lightning. Only you and I looking at this with this plugin. If I'm happy with the way that this looks, then I can head back over, set that lightning style sheets equals true flag, and get that rolled out to my users. Now, again, please bear in mind, it's not going to be 100% perfect. The reason for that is simply that over the years, the DOM or the HTML of pages has changed and evolved. The Lightning Design System has a completely different HTML markup, even completely different styling and styles themselves. And so the team has given their best effort to be able to get you as close as they can to an actual Lightning look. But here's the beauty. You can still go in and add your own SLDS. So if I wanted to go back in here and I was using lightning styles equals true, and I still needed to do a little bit of tweaking, I can add in the actual SLDS because I can simply say apex colon SLDS. And of course, in my particular case, I actually don't want to hand this off to my my users in Classic. I don't want them to see any of that. So I've actually got in my controller, I've actually got a class that says, go figure out what the user is actually in. Are they in Classic or are they in Lightning? And I'm only going to provide SLDS styling, additional SLDS styling when we are inside of Lightning. So then I could make a change and, for example, maybe say that I wanted a style sheet, maybe use, in fact, let's just do something simple down here on our table. Maybe I wanted a little bit of spacing above that. So I could simply say style class equals, and again, begin using SLDS. So let's put a margin on the top. We'll do a large margin like that. Go ahead and save this. And now as we go back over into our page, again, refreshing, we're going to see that we have some spacing that has been added here. Now, you'll notice that this is blue now because I've got both of those styles colliding. Again, the team is working on that right now so that you can actually see those real styles that have been applied there. And there we go. Okay. So once again, and now I've overridden the styles that I had just added there, by the way, just so that you notice that. Now I'm added that back in. Now I see the actual real finished way that this page is going to look once the team rolls this out. Now again, this feature is beta in winter 18. Beta simply because we don't know how you built your Visualforce pages. So we would encourage you to give it a try. Your sandboxes are out. Right now, you can go into your sandboxes. You can begin playing with this feature right now with Visualforce pages in your org. And again, this idea of the Chrome extension, it will be coming very, very soon. With that, wow, that was a lot of content in just a short 1 hour's time frame.
Wow,
of course, yeah. Wow, there we go. Arabella, talk to me.
Well, thanks, Greg. You really plowed through it. So thanks for sharing so much information on this. We are up against time, and we have shared a few links in the Q&A. regarding where you can go to learn more. We've noticed a lot of questions. You guys have a lot of questions about specific components, functionalities, about Lightning Data Service. So there's a few different places you can go. One of them is to the blog post that Greg wrote earlier, and we have the link for that for you in GoToWebinar. The second one is in our Salesforce Stack Exchange, where you can ask specific questions you have about specific functionalities. And if you have particular questions just for Greg, feel free to reach out to him on Twitter at the handle Garazi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Greg.
That's right. Garazi. That is correct.
Yep.
Or you can find me on LinkedIn as well. Just Greg Brewis on LinkedIn. Or if you want to talk in person, please feel free to find me at this little event we're having in November in San Francisco. It's just a small little thing. It's only us and about 750,000 of our closest friends, called Dreamforce. Track me down. Hey, guess what, Arabella? I might actually have a session doing a deep dive, casting spells with Lightning Data Service.
You might have a session or 5. Let's see what happens.
That's right. So again, come to my session at Dreamforce, track me down, talk to me. Arabella, do you have any specific questions we want to answer today, or you want to let it all be done online?
We actually don't have time, but if you do want to ask him other questions in person or attend any Lightning Now events, we'll actually be in several different places in September. You can find them online, but very quickly we'll be in Cologne, Germany in early September, as well as Amsterdam. And on the East Coast of the United States in Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Minneapolis in the mid part of September. So if you can't get the answers you need from Greg or from the other folks at Salesforce online, hopefully you can ping us in one of the places we'll be at. So I think, Greg, do you have anything else you want to wrap up with before we close the webinar?
Obviously, if you want to get more in depth with any of this, Trailhead is the place to go. There's actually a project I wrote doing that action override that uses all of those force record data features that I showed. There's also another one that we're using on our Lightning Now tour, building flexible apps with Visualforce and Lightning components. That project as well, it actually builds that similar properties component. So if you want to dive into that one, again, both of those are up on Trailhead, and it's always the place to go to learn Salesforce.
Great. So thank you so much, Greg. We loved your enthusiasm. We saw a couple of great comments from people attending. So I just wanted to echo that. Thank you so much for sharing your webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.